if we master this as well, life can get bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better and better. And if you write a check for $500, $1,000, $10,000, depending on what it is, that can be a lever. Hey, real estate professionals, welcome back to the RMG Agent Podcast. I am your host, Reed Moore, and we are going to dive into part 2 of leads, listings, and leverage. It's such a foundational part of our business and growing your real estate practice that we wanted to do it justice. And so hopefully you'll get a lot out of this one as well as the last episode. As always, go to rmgagentpodcast.com for all of our episodes, for our blog, as well as to communicate with us and to find resources like our business plan. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our illustrious co-host, Jake Bartlett. Jake, welcome back.
Thanks. Yeah, super excited. Part 1 was awesome. If you haven't listened to part 1 already, I would suggest going back to part 1 before listening to part 2, because it really is, what do we use, triangles in real estate? Yeah. The model is a triangle, and you're going to get, part of the triangle, and you really want to get the whole thing. So yeah, I get really excited talking about this portion.
Okay.
So I think for both of us, right, we love helping other people. We love leading other people.
Sure.
And when we get into growth, we start talking about maximizing our potential and succeeding through others or systems.
Yes.
So we're talking about leverage.
Yes. Leverage is an awesome conversation because once you start into really thinking about leverage, right? So it's easy to go down the rabbit hole of leads. It's not easy to do, but once you make peace with that, now your world's going to start getting bigger. And you're going to start listing properties, you're going to start listing buyers, and it's going to be great. So same as a restaurant, you now have people coming in your door and you're now giving them service. And that's amazing, right? But now we come to this part that if we master this as well, life can get bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better and better. Mm-hmm. Right? And the way that leverage shows up in our life is it shows up through 2 different primary methods. One is leverage shows up through systems. Systems are things that sometimes we pay for, sometimes we just get better and more efficient at what we do, but systems cause us to do more with less. Mm-hmm. And that's usually the place that I encourage people to go first, is to look at leverage as a systems leverage, because a lot of times people that really become successful young in their real estate career, it's because they just hustle and they work hard and they are going a million miles an hour, and a lot of times they are spending a huge amount of energy that they won't be able to burn for the next 5 years. So learning how to be systematic about the way that they go about doing their work is their first logical step. And that shows up primarily in 2 different buckets of systems for a real estate professional. Number 1 is your CRM, right? Where do we put information so that every time we have an impactful conversation with somebody, we know what we said, we know where we're starting, we know their time frames, we know their anniversaries, all of those kind of things. When you're starting out, you may not realize how much you're going to forget. Mm-hmm. But when you start talking to 100 people a week and you start making 20 or 30 really good connections a week, fast forward 2 months, you have too many people to keep track of what's happening with their pets and what's happening with their anniversaries, et cetera, et cetera. So figuring out your CRM, and you can really get frozen up over like, oh my gosh, what's the best technology? There's a bunch of them that work. The best one is the one that you use and use consistently.
Yeah, I will tell you from my personal experience, I once paid for 3 CRMs at the same time because they worked slightly how I wanted them to, but they never worked perfectly.
Yes.
And then I thought the next one would work perfectly, and it didn't. And then I thought the next one would work perfectly. And what I finally learned was exactly what you said. The best CRM is the one that you use.
That's right. And it's funny because all of these actually have to do with you as the real estate professional. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't do lead generation or pay attention to it, then it doesn't really matter how many, like all of these things, it applies. So the first one is your CRM. The second one is your calendar. And maybe I got those backwards. Your calendar is this unbelievably powerful tool that rarely do I find somebody who's not already high functioning that uses it well. Your ability to calendar your priorities, not just in your business, but in your personal life, remove so much mental space and mental capacity, and they cause you to be able to show up, and we'll talk about this in the next episode, in a trusted way, because you don't forget things because it was never yours to remember. It was your system's to remember, and your system never forgets.
Yeah. And when I hear you talk about leveraging with your calendar, I think of one of the first people that I listened to, which was Bruce Hardy, talk about like growing a huge organization. And he leveraged his calendar in the sense that he did all of his listing appointments in the office.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about saving yourself an hour of drive time between each listing appointment, and you're doing 2 a day, right? You just saved 2 hours worth of your time. Like, that is leveraging your calendar.
Having everything in your calendar, and then understanding how to use time. And we'll probably put some resources up on manager time and maker time, or maybe do a podcast on that of just helping people understand how to use their time better. I think it's really, really helpful. So we have systems leverage. And that's the first place that we go a lot of times, because your calendar and your CRM are inexpensive, or like with your calendar, it's free, right? The second one is people leverage. People leverage requires a higher level of skill. So systems leverage requires habits, primarily, a little bit of skill. People leverage requires a higher level of skill. And if you were talking to somebody and they had good system leverage, what would the first place that you would encourage them to start when it comes to people leverage?
I look at it as there's kind of an in-between with the system and the people. There is what I would refer to as like a la carte leverage.
Sure.
I think for the most part, it's a stepping stone onto that full staff type mentality, but it is a way to dabble into that. So a transaction coordinator that you pay per transaction is a great way to take some of that admin stuff off, which would we define that as like $30 an hour work?
Sure, yeah.
You're able to take some of that work off, piece it off to somebody. Now you're back into lead generation doing $500 an hour if done perfectly. And now you've given yourself some leverage. You're going to do more business, and you've gotten a little bit of relief on something that you probably don't love doing,
right,
or you shouldn't be doing if you've gotten to that level. The next type of leverage would be like a virtual assistant, where you can actually get somebody, some people don't love these because they're usually outside of the country.
Sure.
But you can get great VAs that help leverage that. Another one that I've done in the past is like a marketing, say like Fiverr.
Sure, yeah.
Where you can do marketing pieces and bid out to somebody to do it for you. And usually they're like $30 to $50 to do a marketing piece. Whereas if you were to sit down and do it, it'd take you 2 or 3 hours to do this marketing piece, which again, we go back to that lead generation time, $500 an hour. Or even if it takes away from showing houses or meeting with clients, we're talking $60 an hour work. Yeah. Like you have to think of yourself as that your time's worth more than that.
Yeah, and the whole, like, if we just think about the concept of leverage, right? It's a lever. Okay, well, why does anybody use a lever? The only reason you use a lever is whatever you're trying to lift is too heavy, right? Or it's heavy enough that it's creating problems for you. That's exactly what we're looking at here. Because if somebody, I used to do this all the time. There's a project that I know needs done, and I don't want to pay for it. And so, and if I'm doing this right, I don't want to pay for it, not because I can't afford it. Because if I'm doing the lead generation, I'm doing the listings well, now leverage is a natural outcome, because there's now some level of money or freedom from time to be able to do that. And so now I need a lever, but what the default that I experienced for many years, and a lot of people do, is I set out to do this thing and I don't want to pay anybody for it. And so then it doesn't get done. Right. Yeah. And then fast forward a month, a year, 6 years down the road in your business, you still have these really big projects that haven't done, they're important. And you have, not only has it not been done, but you are full of guilt and shame because you haven't done these things. The reality is that it's too heavy of a lift, right? Either because of your skill set or because of your focus or whatever. It needs to be somebody else that you write a check to. And if you write a check for $500, $1,000, $10,000, depending on what it is, that can be a lever that gets you back into leads, listings, and then leverage again, and keeps you moving faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, I'll give you this. if you're at a point in your business that you're doing a ton of business and you know you need leverage, but you keep telling yourself, I'll just do it. Yes. I'll just do this. It's probably time to figure out what that next logical step for leverage is.
Yeah.
And that could be, that a la carte type piece.
Yes.
But once we move from that a la carte to employees or people working for us, what do you look for?
Well, first of all, I have a model that I've used for helping myself through that, and that is I have a 3 strikes and I'm out.
Okay.
So if I set out to do something and I don't do it once, that's strike 1. And I ask myself the question, hey, am I lazy, right? Like, am I just not wanting to work? And the answer is no, like I'm not lazy, I'm doing work. So then I go out and I do a second time and I ask those questions like, okay, so is this something that I'm lazy? Am I avoiding this because it's not the right direction? And if I come to the answer of no, if I don't do it a third time, it's not a what issue, it's a who issue. And so instantly it's like, I don't get a 4th shot at this. It's now somebody else's.
Yeah. What's the saying is that when you hit a ceiling, you're missing a system or a who,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. That's right.
Let's talk about hiring staff or employees or people leverage, like full blown. They're on your payroll.
Yeah. So once I go down the road of doing this, and we talked about this in a different episode, right? You are now taking on the hats of a leader and a business owner and a real estate professional, right? So your world now becomes more complex. And so it's really important to do this right. And the right way to do this is to hire your operational talent first. And a lot of people, including myself, mess this up. Right. I won't go into detail because you guys can go listen to it on another podcast. But suffice to say, if you follow the model and you choose to grow as a leader, you can offload 80% of the work that you think it takes to do your job to a phenomenal hire. And then that will get you into just purely doing the leads, listing, and then the leadership of leverage over and over again. And your world will get big fast.
Yeah, I think the new model is actually 2 operational hires before you hire a single salesperson. So it's operations, then it's a marketing. You split the role from a TC to a marketing person, right? Mm-hmm. And whichever one your first hire, that should be the exceptional. What do they call it? Empire builder type hires, yep. Right? You leverage off what they aren't as good at to the next hire. Mm-hmm. Then you hire a showing assistant to help you show houses, and then you move into a buyer's agent.
Yeah, and you can mess around with. So what I would say about this is that the operational load of doing well at leads and listings and leverage is. It gets bigger faster than the rest of the work does, mm-hmm. and for a period of time. And so if you do this well, and the hard thing about doing it well is a lot of times when you start this, you're not very good. Mm-hmm. So if you do this well, you make one hire, and then the next operational hire is that person's responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. And so you could actually have 2 or 3 operational people with you just absolutely nailing the most important thing in your business. And my experience was I wasn't good enough to do it that way. Looking back, if I had to do it over again, I would do it that way, and I think I'd be able to now. But that's the way that I would encourage people to go.
What about, and maybe we're skipping forward just a little bit, but I think it's a good peek into leverage in the sense. So we've hired an operations person, they're crushing it. We're back in the cycle, leads, listing, leverage. Everything's going great, and now we want to hire our first realtor. Leverage.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
What's that transfer look like?
So going into the place where you start hiring your sales leverage, mm-hmm. right? The first thing that I always think about is what are you hiring them to? And if you're going around this loop of leads, listings, and leverage, at some point it goes from Jake's leads, listings, and leverage to this company's. And so the company has to now. When this is done well, the company now it has an identity, it has a mission, and I start hiring people to that, because I can go out and find really good salespeople, but I ultimately want salespeople that have alignment with my mission, with my vision, with my values, with my beliefs, all of those kind of things. And so the very first thing when somebody does this, I would say time out, like go work with a coach. Go get help figuring out what are these things that I need to be able to put into place, because it's really rare that somebody starts this process and then actually figures out those core elements. A lot of times it's better, easier when the company's smaller to be able to flesh out what the company stands for and who it is.
Yeah, I'll give you a mindset trick that I think helps people get over this process, because there's a lot of agents out there that they get to this point where they've maximized it and then they get stuck and they end up hitting a ceiling and they go backwards. And it's this thought process that only they can do what they do. Mm-hmm. And the mindset trick of that is that your clients actually aren't tied to you. They're tied to the level of service that you give them.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And more people doing their job really well will actually give them better service than you will as yourself.
I've talked to a lot of solo agents, and when they're selling me on how great they are and how great their consumer experience is, they've told themselves a story. And if you peek behind the curtain, you find that there's lots of mess and lots of other things. They just care a lot. Mm-hmm. That's great. You can care that much, but it's better if you care and you actually have the systems and the people leverage to be able to, no kidding, do that job and do that level of service. So that requires a mindset shift, right? When you're hiring and understanding that people will work with other great people that represent what you stand for.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that growth into growing a giant organization is the only pathway, but we come at this of trying to help you mindset wise, so that real estate doesn't run you over as a career, right?
Yeah. You don't have to build a really large organization. There's no really, the reason I do that, right? The reason my company is fairly large is that it lines up with my mission, mm-hmm. right? The issue though is that if you genuinely don't want a large organization, that's great. If you don't want a large organization because you're giving in to limiting beliefs and fears and all that other stuff, then you're limiting the beauty of business, which is it is this place for you to grow as a person and to you to ultimately become better across all areas of your life. So if you're doing this, if you're saying these things because of those limiting beliefs, that's my challenge. Because it's not actually about the bigger company, it's about you overcoming the next hurdle in your life.
Thanks for tuning in for part 2 of Leads, Listings, Leverage. Look for next week's episode, which is going to be bloopers, blunders in real estate, which is a funny one. We're going to talk about some of the, maybe painful and funny moments in our career and lessons that we learned, and maybe some money that we donated to our real estate education fund. So check that one out.